Washington Park is doing. But there's a very interesting article in the Denver Post today on the Denver West section, entitled "A Once-in-a-Generation Opportunity for the Area." That's the Mosaic campus. Founders Hall with the bookstore, is this building. This is President's Hall, and then these two dorms behind are Johnson and Wales, and those are the 4 dorms being remodeled by Archway Communities into 154 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments. There are 2 other dorms on campus that are mentioned in the article that are owned by Denver Housing Authority. And there are conversations ongoing about transitioning those into transitioning housing for migrants. So it is, this was in the paper today. I didn't know about it until I got to church, and Peter said, "Did you see it?" And I don't read the papers until after church, but, and John just mentioned that MSN picked it up and posted it as well. So that's part of what we're going to be talking about. Let's take a moment just to breathe, though, and welcome the Spirit into our conversations today and into this place. May we pray. God of love, thank you for every child of yours, whether you're in this building or joining us online, every child who is a beloved child of yours, and we are all your children. Thank you for the love you have shown toward us as individuals, creating us in your image. Thank you for the love you enable us to share with others in our world who are hurting and struggling. For those who have been impacted by heavy storms, tornadoes over the past few days, we pray that as those communities begin to rebuild, that you'll give them strength. We pray for those who are experiencing war, for Palestinians in Gaza, for Israelis, for all who are under the threat of violence in Ukraine. We pray that your Spirit would walk with them through this day and the days to come. Today, may the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts encourage us, strengthen us, help us to know a path forward. For it's in your name that we pray. Amen. Kathy Carfrey, welcome back. You go, girl.
There's loads of us in this congregation who have had knee replacements or hip replacements, so I think we should start a club. We'll talk about that later. I'm part of the Caring for Community team, who is all about the way we connect with each other and care about each other as we're making this change and leaving this beautiful building. And so what I wanted to talk about today is the change curve. You guys probably know Kubler-Ross's curve that she talks about, the grief curve. You know, if you've looked in your life, sorry, closer. Okay, sorry. We're looking at change and looking at the Kubler-Ross change curve that she developed around grief. And throughout my life, as I've watched myself go through changes, it doesn't just apply to grief. We just put a change curve up here on the back wall. Allison is there, like Vanna White. It's also on the screen, terrific. So some of we've adapted some of what Kubler-Ross did, but first stage is shock and surprise. Denial is the second stage. That's kind of the disbelief, like, no, this can't be happening. Lots of frustration can show up, grief, just true sadness. And then there's ideally a stage where people start to explore and initially engage in what might this change look like. There then may be the stage of acceptance, where people start to function with what might the new look like. And then the last stage is around commitment, accepting and embracing the change. It doesn't go in a straight line. It goes like this, and then this, and then this, and you can be all over the place on that curve. And the cool thing about it is wherever you are, it's okay. One day you're real mad, that's okay. We hope you don't get stuck there, and likely you won't. The next day you might start to move towards, wait, I actually can see how this might work. So we'd like folks to grab a little sticky, maybe later today. There's sticky notes on they're right over there, I can't even think of the word, whatever this is. There's sticky notes over there. Just, if you want to put a sticky note up for where you think you are today, you can use your name, you can use a symbol, you can do whatever, or you don't even have to. But you might put yourself up there and then see where you go. Next week you might move, or next month you might be in a new spot. So we're just wanting we're wanting to acknowledge that wherever you are is okay, it's expected, and we're going to do this together. And if you find you're getting stuck in one stage, that's part of what community's for. We'll help each other through it. All right, so grab a sticky a little bit later. Thanks. Started.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, I got it.
We veterans of knee replacement honor you. Our readings today without reflection, so this is going to be my best sermon yet. Oh, thank you. Let's sing. Living God, touch our hearts through these words and through your Spirit. Kindle our imagination to your life into our actions as we dream and work to shape your new world. We believe that 1 John was written by the disciple John, and here are words of wisdom from him. Dear friends, if God loved us this way, we also ought to love each other. No one has ever seen God. If we love each other, God remains in us, and God's love is made perfect in us. This is how we know we remain in God and God remains in us, because the Divine One has given us a measure of the Spirit. We have seen and testified that the parent has sent the Son to be the Savior of the world. If any of us confess that Jesus is God's Son, God remains in us and we remain in God. We have known and have believed the love that God has for us. God is love, and those who remain in love remain in God, and God remains in them. This is how love has been perfected in us, so that we can have confidence on the judgment day, because we are exactly the same as God is in this world when we love one another. And then a reading from Wendell Berry, a poet, a farmer, an author. He writes, "We have lived our lives by the assumption that what was good for us would be good for the world. We have been wrong. We must change our lives so that it'll be possible to live by the contrary assumption that what is good for the world will be good for us. And that requires that we make the effort to know the world and learn what is good for it." And now we go into life of our community, strengthening the church. Allison. And then we'll move into the next steps.
God calls us into community. God desires for us a big, inclusive, expansive, welcoming community. One where, because of who you are or because of where you are on life's journey, you are welcome. This is called the Big Tent community. The Strengthen the Church offering is a national UCC offering that helps support congregations and initiatives that help us live into the Big Tent community. Funds that are raised for the Strengthen the Church offering through the conferences and the national offices will support leadership development, new churches, youth ministry, and renewal initiatives in existing congregations. So through this offering, we further our commitment to being a multiracial, multicultural church that is accessible to all. So here at Wash Park, each week you'll be hearing a little bit more about Strengthen the Church offering and some examples of churches that have been part of that. But here at Wash Park, we'll receive the offering on Sunday, May 19th, which is Pentecost Sunday, the birthday of the church. So keep this in your head and in your heart.
This is the time for other announcements for our community, if you'd like.
All right. Hold on, I'm going to set this down, okay? On May 7th, St. Francis Center is having the annual PATH lunch. PATH stands for Pathway Towards Housing. And St. Francis Center is going to be opening a 4th housing project next year at 2nd and Federal. So this housing project is particularly for seniors who are homeless, and there are lots of them. And so really love for anybody who'd like to attend to come to that luncheon. It's at Temple Emmanuel. There is no charge. It's a good lunch. And we'd love you to come and support St. Francis Center and what they do in housing. One other thing I want to tell you, because we're not doing prayers and concerns, is, and it's about housing, because that's what I do. We had a resident at St. Francis Apartments who passed away yesterday named Kelly. She was in hospice care, and she'd been homeless a long time and lived with us for 5 years. Her street nickname and what everybody called her was Granny, and she was Granny because she was the most accepting person I knew. Open arms to everyone. And whenever we talked about folks who were still homeless and outside, she was always the fiercest advocate and make sure we were talking about folks in respectful ways. So please remember Kelly and the difference housing can make.
Anyone else have an announcement? Okay, we were expecting you, Scott.
We've got good food today, courtesy of our C3 committee. This is the sign up that we used to pass around in the sanctuary to encourage people to fill in to support worship services. I'm going to put it next to the good food. And I don't know when people go back to get that, but please help yourself and consider helping out on a worship service.
Contact deadline is, well, next week. So get your stuff to me. Pictures, announcements, the usual. All right, thank you.
And now we will begin our meeting, and we could have refreshments if you'd like some now. They look good.
Yeah, now's the time to go get some of the good food that Scott talked about. And if you could be back in about 5 minutes so we don't have too long of a break for the people online. So comfort break for those online and food break for those here. And we'll see you back in about 5 minutes.
Yo. I can't whistle, so I have to say yo really loud when I want to get people's attention. Hello? Are there still people in the fellowship area? Lee? Okay. Oh. Okay, Peter, do you want to start the slide presentation? Okay, this meeting is about the possible move locations for our congregation. So first, we're going to have an overview of the process, which Bev and I are mostly going to handle. I'm going to do an overview. Bev and I are going to do summary information about the different possible move locations. We're going to have some breakout groups. We'll have 4 great breakout groups and 1 with the online people. Then we'll come back together and have a discussion with the whole congregation and those people online. And then Lee will give a benediction, and then we'll sing a song. I think, is that the right order? Okay. So this is kind of the overview of our process. We're going to... Oh, okay. Am I in the way? I can move back. Is that better? So we're going to have the presentation with small groups and the congregational meeting. And then based on the information learned here, the Next Steps team will make an input to the administry team. The administry team will discuss the recommendation that the Next Steps team makes, and will decide when to bring this issue to a vote of the congregation. So we've not set a date for the vote yet. And okay, so I just want to say something before I turn it over to Bev. When we started this group, I realized that there was a lot of information in different places. And what this group tried to do is kind of consolidate it so that it could be presented to the congregation for discussion. So some of you have heard some of these things. Most of you probably haven't heard all these things. There's probably a few of you that have heard all of it. But we're just going to be patient with each other so we can bring everyone up to the right place, and then we can have meaningful discussions in our small groups, in our congregational discussion.
Good morning. Can you see? Okay. You know, I like a lot of pictures and diagrams because words tell you a lot of things, but sometimes you need to see the big overview of what's going on. And I hope that you all have a copy of this chart close by or in your hands. And online, I hope you can see it. Yes, good. So this diagram depicts the process that the Next Steps team and our subgroups used in looking at locations that are available to us. First of all, the solutions process. It was important for us to be creative. All the places will require compromise and workarounds. Now, even this building did not provide us with all of our current needs. We have the cost of the building, the size of the building, maintenance issues. So we started looking outside this building. We have been thinking outside the box, and in order for us to get the optimum result, we need to keep thinking outside the box. We have many criteria for comparison, and we're going to go to the next slide, I believe, which has, yes. First, we listed the criteria to use in making decisions and recommendations, and then we divided those into the criticals and then the nice-to-haves. For the critical, you can see here, we have affordable, accessible restrooms, worship space for 50 to 60 people, a kitchenette, room to grow, meeting space and Christian ed space, sound and Zoom capabilities, access time for worship, storage, office space, access other than Sundays, parking, and handicap access. For the nice to have, we had location, possible relationships with others on the campus, a safe feeling, piano space, inspiring and pleasant environment, a separate fellowship space, less maintenance, to be a tenant, not an owner, and what is going to be a rental term length. So reminder, this is a process. We changed our minds a lot during this process. Some things that we originally had on our list came off, such as space for fish, as they have now located other space in the immediate Washington Park area, which is important for their work. And other items were added when we realized that we needed a really good Zoom and audio capability. So it was a learning process for us as we went through this. We've done a lot of work looking at these locations and the types of locations to determine what should be the best solution for our church. We've now divided these into viables and no longer viables. So our next chart, yes, shows those, I'm just going to list these first, and then we'll get into the details. The no longer viables are new build, commercial rental space, the Ping Pong Palace, the school auditorium space, Loretto Heights, Bookies, and ILIF. Those that remain viable, we have one focused major location and several backup. These would be the Archway Mosaic, purchase and renovate a building, Pearl Street Church rent or buy, rent from a church faith community that does not meet on Sundays, and short or long-term rents from another church.
So I'm just going to go through the reasons that the no longer viable group is no longer viable. And here we go. we thought a new build, that the cost to procure land and build would probably put us outside the city of Denver or in a neighborhood in Denver where we weren't sure we would want to be. The Ping Pong Palace was a place on South Broadway that currently had a bunch of ping pong tables in it. Therefore, it was named the Ping Pong Palace. And that property had a lot of flexibility and some potential for us as a congregation, but it was recently sold. We looked at commercial rental spaces. Several people did a lot of research on this, Peter and I think Annie. And I thank both of them. I think what we eventually realized is that the cost was going to be prohibitive for us. Normally there's a rental fee which covers probably the financing and the profit for the landowner, and then you have to pay for taxes, utilities, and repairs. So all that money we haven't been paying because we're a tax-free institution, we would be now paying for this space, we would be leasing. Peter's estimate was about $10,000 a month. And one of the proposals we had, we could lease back this building for $10,000 a month, plus paying the operation, utilities, and taxes. So it could be more than $10,000 a month. School auditorium was talked about. We thought that that would be very difficult because we'd have to put up all the chairs, take everything down each Sunday, and we weren't sure where we would have an office for our admin person or our pastor, or where we would store things. We did look at the Catholic Church at 1201 South Elizabeth, which was a very beautiful building, but it's very small, it's not accessible, and it is very, very close to the Kirk of the Bonnie Brae. On a couple of other places, we did, one of our realtors checked in with the new owners of the Loretto Heights, which is I think they're doing another big redevelopment project there. They were not interested in renting out the chapel there. The Bookies was considered, but I think the owners decided to rework it into small offices rather than keeping it the large space it was. ILIF, just to rent their chapel, was too expensive, and we would have to pay for parking. So I'm going to pass it on to Beck.
Okay, moving on to the viable locations that we have looked at. A few weeks ago, you may have heard me discuss some of the attributes of Archway Mosaics, their old bookstore. And that was after a few of us visited with our architect, and we had a lot of questions. And most of those questions concerned the historical designation of the bookstore. So where are we now? And as of this week, we have some of those questions answered. Leasing the bookstore, a few other attributes first. Leasing the bookstore would give us a close association with the UCC-sponsored Archway and the opportunity for relationships with others on the campus. Now, this is the important update from our architect, who recently met with the Archway architect. And the good news is that the renovations that we considered essential are all doable. That area that we had looked at behind the big area, I think they were looking at it for fish for a while. It was a small room. That area is not considered part of the historical designation. And so we would be able to use that and build a kitchenette in there, and the other end of that room could be a small little meeting room, kind of like an open kitchen concept if you have that at your home. Then the rest of the open space could be divided in multiple ways via partitions. And we look for ideas on this from our architect to help us develop that. It does have sufficient office space and areas that we can use for meetings and Christian education. There are accessible restrooms and an accessible ramp to the main floor. Archway told us that the cost would be $5,000 a month or below. That would be considered in the negotiations. Not ideal is that the balcony is not ADA accessible, and we cannot make it that way. But we would have to, for that, we would have to have all of the meetings moved downstairs as needed for people who have some kind of, who are not able to climb up the stairs to the balcony. The parking is a walkable distance with a potential for drop-off. That is not expected to be an issue on Sunday mornings. For backup locations, we start with purchasing and renovating a building. With the right space, we would build what we want and what is important to us. The cost would be high, especially closer in Denver. The effort to manage the renovation is monumental. As many of you know from renovating your homes, well, this would be, add on another 10 times that difficulty. With this choice, we would still be managing a building, even if we hire someone to do that work, and there would be an expense and decision-making and oversight still needed, but we would get exactly what we wanted there for a price. If we dive deeper into a specific building, we could buy or lease and renovate the church that's on South Pearl Street. The cost of purchasing that is $2.7 million, and then we would add on the cost to renovate and operate. It is in Washington Park, and we could serve the world in a way that would be similar to what we're doing right now. There are about 6 parking spaces, and the rest are on the street. So start practicing your parallel parking right now. The sanctuary is small, and there's no office space and limited storage in that area. There is a 3-bedroom apartment on the upper level that could be leased, which would be bringing a little money. Another backup location would be renting from a faith community that does not meet on a Sunday. We could share the resources since we meet on different days. We estimate that the rent for that would be $4,000 to $5,000 a month. With this, there would be many unknowns: office and storage space, space for meetings on other days of the week. The last backup that we consider is a long or short-term rental from another church. The two that we have looked at so far are First Plymouth and First Unitarian. Either could be a permanent or a temporary location while we're looking at other permanent locations. The cost, again, $4,000 to $5,000 a month. We could have space for storage and offices, and one of our questions for that would be, would we become lost within those churches?
And that's the end of the formal presentation. So we're going to break into groups now, and I think there's a little chart. Okay, so great norms for the breakout groups. Each group has a moderator and a note taker, and the note taker is going to faithfully take notes of the questions, thoughts, and opinions that are expressed in the group. So group members, your responsibility is to check the note taker and make sure that anything you said is captured faithfully. And everyone in the group, we'd like to have the opportunity to speak if they so desire. And here,
that you should do that. Thank you. I thought about that.
Yeah,
So
and
to repeat, for folks who didn't hear because I wasn't using a microphone. If you have other ideas or you want to share questions or thoughts after the meeting today, you're invited to send them in to anybody in the group or groups, and they will be incorporated. Thanks.
And I neglected at the beginning to let you know who was in the group. So aside from myself and Bev, we also had John, Lee, Tom, Carol, and I'm gonna forget the last person. Oh, Peter. Not to be forgotten, not easily forgotten. And there is, on the last slide after we get back together and we're about ready to close, there's my email address, and if you're interested in anyone else's email address that you don't have, you can ask me to send it to you, or you can ask that person for their email address. Just in case, I know those of you who have done Myers-Briggs, I'm a strong P, so I'll always think of something later. So this is for those of you who think of something later.
I just want to add that I live one house away from the Pearl Street Church. Parking in that neighborhood, because I live right there, is really, really difficult and tight. We've got apartment buildings, we've got all sorts of stuff going on in that neighborhood. I think parking should be considered a really, really tough, because yeah, parallel parking, if you can find it, you might have to park a couple blocks away.
Good to know. Yes, Annie?
Could you say more about the accessible bathrooms and the Christian ed space and the deciding that the parking is not an issue? That seemed like, I didn't know the thinking behind those because I've seen the space.
Okay, I can address the parking. We believe that there's some areas pretty close to the bookstore that will be closed on Sunday, one being the school, and the other, right now, the Dirt Coffee Shop is not open. And we have been assured that we'll be able to drive on the sidewalks to drop people off. And then I'm going to let Bev answer the question about the bathrooms, because fortunately for me, I was visiting my granddaughters when the last tour took place, and I was last there in October, and my memory is getting a little fuzzy.
For the accessible bathrooms in Mosaic, there are 2 bathrooms that are fully ADA compatible, and they're open bathrooms. They're non-generic. They're not gender specific. For those of us who visited and didn't see that, could you say more? Sure. They as back close to the room that we are planning on a kitchenette, across the hall from there are 2 bathrooms right in our area, not available to anyone else in the building, and they are large. You can definitely get wheelchairs in there. There are bars for everybody who has had their knees or hips replaced recently, so they have been renovated up to standards at this point. Christian ed space, we would start out upstairs. The one office is very large and can be divided out into breakout areas and an office. And still we would look to the architect to help us with that. And using partitions, we think that we can make some of the areas downstairs under the balconies into private enough areas that we could have some Christian ed, not during the service. If it's during the service, it would need to be upstairs or in that small area by where the kitchenette would be. So it's not everything is ideal, but we think we can work with the architect to get items that we need there. Yeah.
I have a question about elevator to the second. Is that just absolutely not possible?
Yeah, from what we hear from the architects, no, it's not possible.
Wow.
They won't allow us to make that kind of a change in that building.
Huh.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to encourage us to move on to the breakout groups where we can record questions, and when we come back, we can answer those so everyone can hear. So I think we've got, if your birthday is in January to March, you go with Bev and Scott in the fellowship area. If your birthday is from April to June, you go with Allison and John. And just because it does get a little noisy in here, we moved that this morning after the slide was created and downloaded to the Silver Chalice room. So John and Allison, birthdays April to June. If your birthday is from July to September, Carol and I will be over in this area, as please join us there. And October to December birthdays, Tom and Robin will be in the pews over there in that lovely little conversation circle. And Kathy will be leading the discussion on Zoom. So we'll probably come back in about 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, Peter's going to kind of see if we're mostly done. And then we're going to get back together. Peter, can you go back one so we can remind people what we're discussing? I think we... So anyway, we kind of want to talk about what questions people have, what clarifications they need, so we can get that information back to everybody when we come back together, or research it and get it out to everybody later on. We need to talk about what kind of opinions and ideas you want to share back to the congregation when we get together. And we want kind of people's read on whether they're ready to entertain a vote to move to Mosaic. But we're not going to vote today. We're going to, those of us who are Ps like to think, and there might be more information we need to get out to people, and I think we all need to kind of think about this. It's an important decision.
Can I ask one more question? This is Amy online.
Hi, Amy online.
Hi. So I had reached out about a potential tour because I never got to see the space, and that kind of, I wasn't great about following up on that either.
Yeah, I was going to follow up with you and Marty and Kathy. I knew Kathy was probably not ready for a tour, and I've had a little bit more on my to-do list than normal. So we'll be reaching out to the three of you and to find a good date, because I know you're probably some of the few people. Anybody who wants to visit and hasn't been able to, please email me. My email address will be at the end, but it's pretty easy. It's maggievancleef@gmail.com.
That's great.
We'll
Thanks,
get another
Maggie.
tour set up, but I was just kind of waiting for everyone who was recovering from surgery that wanted to go to be ready.
Thank you so much.
So it's on my to-do list. It's just, you just haven't seen my email yet. So, all
I'll
right,
reach out again. Thank you.
let's break into groups, and I'll see you back here in either 20 or 30 minutes. Peter's going to be our timekeeper for that.
Yeah, we might just switch. Okay, most of us are here. Amy, could you go get the rest of the folks? And tell them we're all waiting. Patiently, though. Yeah, I know. Fun time. So what we're going to do right now is do the report outs, and the easels you can maybe see, maybe not either, but Peter's going to zoom in on them so you will be able to see them much better. And we are basically reading out what the different groups said. So it's more about getting our information to each other about what we've said in our groups. So let's try to just keep it that way, rather than if there's like a question like you're not understanding what the group said, then we can flush that out a little better. Scott?
Are we going to read everything out first and then have Are we going to read everything out first and then have a group discussion, or what's the process?
Yeah, I think that's what we were thinking about, is making sure that you might have had a question that you didn't get to bring up in your group, but let's see how many other people have that question, and then we can talk about it after the report outs. Okay? All right. So could the group that was in back here come up and report first?
I didn't sign on for talking. In a big group. Well, come stand with me anyway. Okay, what I'm going to do is read through these, and actually, yeah, I can read those fine.
Just the things that we're concerned about Archway, I put in a star, since a lot of things were, but some weren't. So, just so you understand my little key.
Okie dokie. What are the implications for the lack of accessibility to the second level? Need firm commitment to ability to drop off mobility impaired individuals. Need to get this permission. Thank you. I'll let Annie read. Archway wants us to be there. Faith communities that don't meet on Sunday have other use during the week. Maintenance of parking lot and sidewalks, commitment by ULC. That's Urban Land Conservancy, who actually owns all the land around the building. Audio-visual acoustics for neighbors at Archway. So there are apartments above our space. What is the actual capacity of bookstore for a large service? Purchasing and renovating a building seems counter to purposes in selling our South Williams Street properties. Can we use bookstore every day? Shared space should reduce rent, less independent spaces for use. Try and negotiate the ability to sublease. Look into St. Vincent Church. Golf cart shuttle for, could there be a golf cart shuttle for parking to bookstore?
So a lot of these questions are really good ones, and I think some of them are just easily answered today. How would that be for people? You? Okay.
Yeah, I'd rather you do that and not answer those.
Okay. Is everybody else? Anybody else? Is everybody good? So hear them all first. Okay, good. So the next group would be the group that was in the Silver Chalice room.
All right. So we had a lot of questions that I believe this is ours. I'll hold it. All right. So we also had detailed questions about, what's actually going to be in the lease. So what is and isn't included in the rent, and what are the other terms of the proposed, conditions? How does parking work exactly? I mean, are we really going to be able to use that little access area that's halfway up the block? Are we really only limited to the spaces down in the corner? On Sundays, is it going to be different? What's the real deal? What about outside signage? We still want people to be able to find our church. So if we can't put any signs out, that's going to be a problem. What about our cross? What about our peace pole? Are any of those possible? If we do end up having a church school, what is the actual plan? I mean, we've talked about a bunch of different possibilities, but if we move forward, we need a a real plan. They want a commitment that we're going to get a professional sound engineer. Even in this building, which has good acoustics, some of us have trouble hearing, we want to improve that. Can we still do a CMA type program? I mean, we have a lease. Can we let other people use our space? Yes, no. Can we charge? Yes, no. All of that stuff. Long term, people want to know what the heck are we going to call ourselves? Wash Park in Park Hill? What's? I mean, that's not really a location specific thing, but it came up, so we put it down. And how are we going to establish relationships in our new location? We can't. We're going to have to be good neighbors to different people, and so we've got a plan for that. Again, that's not particularly location specific, but it's something we were concerned about. All right. We did talk briefly about, hey, does anybody here want to be on a new building committee to do a new build, like the committee didn't want to do? And everybody was pretty much, committee is absolutely right about that. We're going in the right direction there. So that's a brief summary. Do we want to do that group next?
Sure.
Whoever that group was?
We had many of the same questions. Sorry. We had many of the same questions about Mosaic, like if we lease it, do we control it? Same kind of questions. Do we get to decide who else comes in, or do we have to let other people come in if Archway wants to? So basically, that was one question. Has there been discussions already of the terms of the lease? The other question was about Pearl Street. We wanted to know, has anybody really looked into it? Is it worth buying and renovating? These are just the questions. We didn't really talk about the answers that we came up with, which some were known. Mosaic, back to Mosaic, is also, one person wanted to know where the ramp was and where it came into the space. Also, they thought the shape of the room was too boxy, so they wanted to make sure that there was a way to make it feel more homey, so to speak. They also wanted to know who owns the whole Mosaic. Archway only obviously owns some buildings, including ours, or not ours, but the one we're looking at. Effectiveness of the partitioning was a concern, a noise concern.
Okay, then our final group. Our final group in the building, and then we'll hear from the online people.
Our group did not have as many questions about the presentation. So these were thoughts that we wanted to share back with the congregation. First is, could we revisit a merger with another church? We would then, as a congregation, choose which church we wanted to merge with. And the rationale behind that is there is safety in merging with another church. We as a community would decide where we're going to go, and we would be joining other people. Because the flip side of that is, if we choose to move somewhere, if people don't follow to a new location, can we survive as a church? There is safety in merging with another church because there's a collection of additional people. what does it mean to have a relationship at Mosaic? What's the vision? What is the vision that we might have of relationship with other individuals or other organizations at the Mosaic campus? Could we explore a stronger relationship with a commercial realtor for a non-Mosaic space? The broker who helped sell these properties is looking for commercial space, but this was just a question back to the congregation. Do we have any sense of how many people would move? Today was an important day. We have a good number of people here, but there are a lot of people who are not with us today. Do we want to take a poll? And another comment was moving to Mosaic is scary because there are a lot of lease questions that are still open, as well as we've heard, as well as we don't know what things will ultimately look like. And we could, but at the same time, we could be, we have the opportunity to be creative in our worship, creative in our actions. Some people don't necessarily want to be a mission-centric congregation. They are much more interested in having a spiritual community. We have been a strong community here. So that was just a comment back to the congregation. And finally, there was a request that when we vote, because we asked, there were only 4 of us, all 4 of us were ready to take a vote on Mosaic in the near future, but there was a request that it be anonymous, that there is an anonymous opportunity for voting. Online, Kathy, do you want to speak to your group, please?
Yes, and I can share my screen if Peter wants me to. Please do. Is that a yes? Yes. Okay. That's weird. There we go. Okay, so our Zoom group had these questions, wanting some additional clarification. Is there a possibility of an eventual lift to the second floor? There's an understanding that an elevator is not possible, but might there be another way to get up to the balcony, perhaps like a stair chair? More detailed information about the Zoom experience and possibilities at the Mosaic campus. And how might the balcony at Mosaic be used? Is there a plan for use? And the discussion about that included use as a possible overflow space for people to sit during worship, since it overlooks the main space. There has been discussion of the office space that already exists up there, possibly being used for CE, as well as the space behind the stairs as a possible space for CE. And then there's been discussion about having some flexible office space on the balcony with flexible partitions. What the Zoom group wants the congregation to know is they want to make sure everyone who's not yet seen Mosaic has an opportunity to do so before a vote is taken. That there's a concern that any place open to the public be ADA accessible. And so a little more information about what is actually considered a public space that needs to be ADA accessible. The group would like to vote with the understanding that decisions on what we do with a space would be ongoing. So while we don't have all the answers yet, we would like to take a vote and then continue to work on some of the things that remain to be solved. A couple people really wanted to recognize the work that's been done already and want to move forward with a vote. There was a point raised that we want to maintain momentum and not burn out our leaders who have been doing all this work for the last several years, and additional appreciation the work the team and not just the team, but folks have been doing in working groups and so on, and a belief that that the idea of moving to a space owned by Archway is forward-looking. And then everyone on Zoom is ready to take a vote in the near future. That just want to make sure everybody who wants to has seen the building before the vote.
Well, she's right here. Can she not?
Mary Alice, can you?
I'll use, okay. Mary Alice, we're just wondering how you're doing. Everybody is thinking about you.
Thank you. I'm doing well. And as a matter of fact, the doctor was just here and I look like I'm probably going home tomorrow.
Good news. Good news. So what we'll do now is go through the questions, and we do have a lot of information about the questions that have been raised today, and thank you for raising them, or your comments as well. So, okay.
I'm going to generally say that we have talked issues at like a 50,000 foot perspective with Archway, but now they're getting closer to getting their tenants into the apartments, and they'll be able to focus their attention. We also now have this information we've just learned from the architect about what we can modify in the space. I think many of you know, but I'll repeat this, that the land is owned by the Urban Land Conservancy, and Archway, I think, has a 99-year lease on the buildings. Do I have that correct? Yeah. Okay, so the 4 dormitories that Archway has renovated, they have a 99-year lease for. So they control the space, but Urban Land Conservancy controls the land. So when we go into negotiations on the lease, we'll be talking about things that we don't have specific answers for. And I'll list some of what those are, but getting input from people about what they'd like to see is really useful, so we know what we want in negotiations. So things like, how much parking can we have? Can we drive on the sidewalks to drop people off, have like a shuttle service on Sundays? Will we be able to sublease space to music groups if the acoustics is good? You know, so things like that. Will we get a discount if we let Archway and Urban Land Conservancy have occasional meetings there? But I mean, obviously, we would want to control the calendar as we do in this building. I can try and talk about some specific things, but there are many things we don't know. I think our group asked about the term of the lease. We'll probably be going for 5 years with renewals up to 10 years. At least that's what I think would be good. But if you guys disagree with me, I want to hear 8 years, 4 years, 2 years, whatever. So, and I think that's where having my email address, when you think of things, like, oh, I really want to see this in our lease, send them to me. The outdoor signage is something we don't know about, and my eyes are going to fail me in trying to get through all these questions. So we want to try and control it if we leased. Yeah, 5 years renewable. We're gonna be going for that, and I think that Archway would be amenable. Let's see. Did whoever wanted to know where the ramp figure out where it is? Okay. Does anybody need to have that reiterated? Okay.
If you're looking at the front door going into the main area, the ramp is just to the right of that, and it goes down, makes a turn, and then you go into the building on the main level. If you're going in the front door, you're going to go down steps to get to the main level. So the ramp comes out right next to where the steps come down on the into the main level. So it's not inaccessible. It's very close to the front door.
Just to let you know, Jean Ingalls has used that ramp, and she found it during the winter to be a little slippery. So that's one concern she brought up.
I asked about that, and they've already told us that they are willing to put strips on that ramp also, if it's still slippery.
I do want to mention that some of where things go in the space, we think the pastor's office is going to be upstairs, but where the youth education might be, a lot of this will be determined when we start working with the architect. We had the initial conversation with the architect about whether we would be able to put in a kitchenette, because we felt that was really important, and what things exactly can be modified in the space. So we have that information, and as we negotiate the lease, we'll be simultaneously working with an architect and with an acoustics and visual arts specialist to make sure that we can customize things. Shape of the room is boxy. I think one of Peter's rendition, it's actually kind of like this building where the pulpit's on the side. Is this still a pulpit? Maybe. But the speaker stands on the side. And so if you look at this, it is, the rectangle shape that Archway is, and we may or may not use under the balconies. I'm sure we would use it in overflow seating. I don't know if we'd use it in regular seating. But that's the kind of thing we're going to work out with an architect. So some of these questions we don't have answers for. I think the architect would help us with the effectiveness of the partitions. Let's see. I already said that Urban Land Conservancy owns the whole site. Yeah, and they would take care of the shoveling, but that was one of the questions the group I was in had. So what kind of commitment does Urban Land Conservancy have to the maintenance of that area? And so I don't know if anybody knows. Yeah, that's something. Yeah, so it's great that you've brought all this up. So if you have input on how you want things to go, that's even more specifics, please email them to me so that when we start working on the lease, we can include them. I'm going to move on to this. This is a lot on merging, and I think this is something that the administrative team should talk about. I know that Lee attends a group that meets about monthly with other denominations in the area, and many of them are just kind of starting on the conversations we've been having for the last 4 years. So merging with someone who's not quite there yet, and then going through the whole process again, I think was dispiriting for some of us. But we do have that conversation. Tom and Scott and I attend it periodically, but a lot of times we let Lee attend.
Other churches, Parkview or
Okay. The Parkview and Park Hill are having similar conversations to ours. Parkview is in conversation with Archway about repurposing their land into low-income and affordable housing. And there's also a group of churches that meets once a month to talk about these kinds of issues. And those conversations will be ongoing. And if we're at Mosaic, who knows what comes out of the conversations with churches that are around that area. And we're about 10 minutes, I think, from Park Hill, and a little farther at Mosaic. So that's some of what's happening.
All right, so a lot of this had to do with merging, and so I think merging could come later. I think it's something that we still want to have in the back of our minds and to keep our relationships with other churches growing.
Hey, Maggie.
Yeah?
One other thing about the merging idea that I bumped into when doing research on what lots of folks had done before I started participating with the meetings was that we all who were doing the discussing had decided that we liked very much what WPUCC was, what our flavor is, if you will, and that if, when we might merge, that we'd be likely to lose some of that. And I would put for myself that we do have a slightly different flavor than some of the other UCC churches, and I think it's worth preserving. So that's one point against that had been raised before that made merging a less attractive option.
And I do kind of related to that, the question about, or the comment about wanting to be more of a community rather than a mission-centric. Some people don't want mission-centric since they want what they want is a spiritual community. I think that one diagram that we first viewed in August talks about both those things. I think what we're trying to do moving forward is to preserve our community and still be a force for good in the world. And I think some of us think one of those things is more important, and some of us think the other is more important. And I think the fact that there is a real possibility for interacting with a community of unhoused people or, low people who can't afford our housing, which I think, to be honest, is a lot of our kids, might put the emphasis more on the mission in the world on this, but I really want to stress that, at least from my perspective, we're trying to stay together as a spiritual community because we really love being together. And we also want to do good work in the world. One isn't more important than the other, in my mind.
Let's get.
I appreciate what you're saying, and I would resist the temptation to have a rebuttal to the comments because they were offered in an open-ended space. So I don't really want our leadership to then just do a rebuttal to the comments. It feels like then the comments haven't been received. So I think questions like the term of the lease or the signage, those are really concrete questions, but the bigger, more philosophical ones doesn't feel like the commentary is being received. It's just being rebutted.
Okay, but from my perspective, if people aren't understanding that both things are equally important, then we're not doing our job in getting that message out. So
I think that message, okay. I just wanted to say that that's
trying to do is.
So going through all the comments in this space may not be the best thing to do. Yeah, just answer the ones that can be answered easily and that are not Phyllis. Okay.
Good point. If I could use the same words, I would, but at our meeting yesterday afternoon, preparing for this meeting, John mentioned and if John, you want to say what you said, but that we've done a lot of work, and we're like not wanting to start over again, but we're kind of to the place where we're trying to make decisions. So some of the stuff we can't just go back to and start looking again for real estate, although our real estate agent is looking and talking to other real estate people. So we haven't concluded, but we are trying to get to the end of this. And a lot of these questions have to do with Mosaic. And until we say Mosaic's our place, we're kind of hanging Archway out there on a hook saying, well, we want it, but we're not sure. And so I think some of the stuff will fall into place more easily once we make a decision. And the other thing that we have to keep in mind is we need to be off the premises by the end of the year at least. So it's time. It's difficult, and there's a lot of sadness, perhaps, but this, just to say we're at this point where we have to make decisions. And, you know, some of the things about Archway, they really want us to be there. And I think that's important.
I just wanted to go back to what Annie said. I think that what Maggie's trying to say, it was put in the questions up there as a question, so she was trying to respond to it. And I think it's agreeable what Maggie's saying, is that I don't think that there's an either or. I think that we can be mission-centric and we can be community-centric. And that's what she was trying to respond to on that question. So I don't think that's pushback personally.
And to tag on there, sorry, it's Emily on Zoom. I mean, I wrote this, but it's not able to be seen by everybody in the chat. But to kind of push back against what Annie was saying is, you know, personally, I want to explore all the questions and all the options and, you know, what people are thinking both concretely and philosophically, because it's going to help me understand where the community is as a whole before voting. So why would we not want to have a discussion about that? Like, I feel like that would then be hiding things from the congregation, which I don't agree with.
Well, I just say we've tried to get the information out there, and everybody has, you know, an opinion, and that's good. So I think we've been pretty upfront with the information sharing. And just so you know, again, the people who are on the committees, please talk to them and raise your concern or your question, because you can have more of a conversation individually.
I would like to say, and I may be misinterpreting what I heard Annie saying, but I think what she was trying to put forward was, for right now, we have a limited amount of time, and it was good to answer the points on the boards that could easily be answered, but the things that are more philosophical deserve to be discussed, not just information put forward now. And so I think, and that sounds a little bit like what, I couldn't see who it was, but whoever was just commenting, thank you, Emily, that's good. We do need, and we should have discussions about the philosophical questions, but that's not for today. Is that close enough, Annie?
Are there other questions people wanted to raise off this?
And if you're more comfortable writing them down on a card and turning them in, you can do that too, right? Okay.
Yes, we could answer in writing all the questions that people have raised. In terms of naming it,
Just to reiterate, one of the other things that we had on the slide deck that we were presented is we know that some people like to ponder, think, and then compose. And that's why we offered up the email address, and also if you want to do it on cards. So this is not the end of the conversation. It is not intended to be the end. We want you to come talk to us. We want you to think about it if you are a thinking person. Write, rewrite, draft, redraft, spell check, because I always do that, and get your questions answered. So this is not the end. This is just the next step. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
There's no elevator in the building, and we couldn't put an elevator in because that would go against the historic nature of the building. Yeah, we couldn't go a lift. We asked the architect. We asked
What about, so it's Emily again, in the online group, and I told this to Kathy. I was the one that really brought up that lift question, but I did a quick Google search, and there are like kind of automatic stair climbing wheelchairs that are completely separate, like they're completely mobile against of their own device. And I mean, they have to have somebody in it and then somebody else kind of pulling it, but it has tracks on it that sort of climbs stairs on its own. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, since it's not going to be a permanent change to the space that is historic, I think that's a possibility.
This is Kathy. One thing I'm hearing, and I have heard before, is a need for having a church discussion about who we are as a church community and who we want to be. And I do think that can be a conversation that's separate from a vote on location. I think I don't think we need to assume that if we vote to move to Mosaic, that we are going there to be of service to residents. In fact, I think that would be inappropriate to make that assumption. So I do think we can take a vote about location, but I also think that this congregation is ready to have a conversation about who do we really want to be as a church.
Amen.
So that could be one of our future meetings, is talking about what we want to be when we grow up.
I would like to just add a comment here that when we started this process, we did a lot of discussion about who we are and what was of value to us, whether we are a community or mission led. And that conversation took place several years ago and was pretty thorough.
Yes. And I would just say, I know some people took it as a joke, what we want to be when we grow up, but I think we are growing, and I think we're ahead of the curve of a lot of churches that don't know what to do, so are hanging on until they die. And I, again, just appreciate our decision making and how we're doing it together as a group.
I was on the Google Drive yesterday trying to get more familiar with it, and I came across a document there that was something like who we are, the bottom line. And if you can get access to that, it was really worthwhile rereading. It's a good clarification. So I think, yeah, I could put it in contact. I actually thought, yeah, this would be a good thing. Okay. Just wanted to say.
Okay, it seems like maybe we're getting tired. But there's been a lot of good information, questions shared today. And let us commit to meeting again, maybe about the mission question, because I agree, it's pretty essential to what we're trying to do. And, think about a vote. Would people be opposed to taking a vote on Mosaic next month? Okay. Laura has a question.
Do we have a definition of membership?
No, we don't. Laura asked, do we have a definition of members? And that's come up a number of times over the past year. Yeah. We really haven't been asking people to officially be members. In some cases, other people wanted to be.
Maybe we give them a chance to join before the vote.
Yeah, or maybe that's not as important as it was 20 years ago. Also, I think that's an ongoing question that we have. And who belongs and who doesn't.
I mean, that would require a change in our bylaws to have people voting on such big decisions without being members. So I think maybe we need to change the bylaws, but we would need to change the bylaws to allow non-members to vote on such a big matter.
I think that's a larger, one of the philosophical conversations about what's a member. Absolutely.
So if you have input, admin our leadership would really like to hear your opinions. Because we've gone, like the last vote we had last August about selling church property, everybody who was there was allowed to vote. And maybe not everybody was an official member, although we haven't stressed that in recent years. Membership.
Tom, this is Amy online. Can I make a comment?
Sure.
I'm not an official member, but if I were to be permitted to vote on an upcoming issue, to your original question, I feel like a vote next month would be premature for me if I haven't had a chance to see the property. So hopefully that is something I'll coordinate with Maggie about to do as soon as feasible.
Sure. That was mentioned many times, so we do need to have another visit there. Elizabeth?
We wouldn't have to be in person to vote. We could do it over, I'm just worried I might not be here on the day we vote, that's all. Could I vote over email or something?
Does the bylaws say attend as long as we're having Zoom for church services? I don't think that's a problem.
So the question, okay, John.
The word in the bylaws is attend. And since we've been attending church through Zoom and on Insight, as long as we use the same definition, I don't believe that there's a problem with Zoom people voting. I can't see a problem with it. We might have problems if the vote were close on the definition of a member. The previous vote was so lopsided it wasn't an issue. But we do have a constitution and we do have bylaws, and if that becomes an issue, we'll just have to work through it. That's what part of being a community is, in my opinion.
I'm in no way advocating exclusivity. No way. What does it take to be considered a member? I mean, yeah, I mean, it could be that wide open. But I think we need to talk about it.
So we're looking for, I think, final comments now. Just so you know, we're going to be winding it up here.
And I just want to say, regarding spiritual community and mission-driven, and you all know I'm mission-driven, if we were one of those things and not the other, it wouldn't make sense to me to be here. Both, I think, for me, I just want to say it's an and. I want both those things. I think that's who we are.
Good. So Scott's saying cut it off now, so it's time to end. Just one final word, and that is, again, thanks for participating, and thanks for the work of many people in the congregation on all these different committees. There's been a lot of heartfelt donation of time and effort and going beyond what is asked of people too. So thank you. And now our closing song, you can look at your bulletins, is Go Make a Difference.
May the love of God, the peace of Jesus the Christ, and the presence and the hope of the Holy Spirit go with you today and throughout the week to come. Amen. Peace be with you. Peace be with you, those who are online. Thank you for joining us today.
Peace with everyone.
Thanks, Mary Alice.
ready to keep going.